Hi there, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's November 22nd. Today, we celebrate the man who wrote extensively about the history and flora of Germantown. And we'll learn about the 11-roomed garden created to honor the tobacco magnate, James Buchanan Duke. We'll hear some beautiful thoughts on nature by an English Victorian author who was born on this day in 1819. And we grow that garden library with an adorable old book on topiaries. I'll talk about foraging for a Yule log, and then we'll wrap things up with a friendly post about November strawberries from 1843. But first, let's catch up on a few recent events. Garden Know-How shared a post called Gravel Bed Garden Design, Tips on Laying a Gravel Garden. I love gravel beds in gardens. I don't see them very often anymore, but when I do, they definitely get my full attention. I especially love it when they're enhanced with a water feature like an urn fountain or a rain chain. This post was written by Becca Badgett, who's the co-author of How to Grow an Emergency Garden. And she suggests incorporating ornamental grasses, herbaceous perennials, and even trees or shrubs to your gravel garden. She said add hardscape features like benches, water features, clay pots, or tin planters, and then large boulders will also complement the gravel garden construction. If you're thinking about installing a gravel bed in your 2020 garden, you should check out this post. And then Richard Spencer over at secretsofgardening.com shared a post called The Ultimate List of 30 Best Perennials for Landscaping. Richard recently updated this comprehensive post, and I love how he starts the post out. He says, when choosing plants for your yard for the first time, it can be overwhelming without a lot of experience to try to find the best perennials for landscaping and the ones that give you the highest value for your money. As we are visual creatures, we tend to pay at first more attention to external things, and that's not always the right way to go. This is where advice from a seasoned expert comes in handy, and Richard's list is an excellent place to start. Now, if you'd like to check out these curated articles for yourself, you're in luck, because I share all of it with the listener community in the free Facebook group, the Daily Gardener Community. So the next time you're on Facebook, just go up to the search bar and search for the Daily Gardener Community, request to join, and I'll admit you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of the Germantown historian, botanist, and writer Edwin Jellett, who was born on this day in 1860. The town of Germantown owes such a debt of gratitude to Edwin Jellett, who devoted himself to capturing the history and the flora of the area, now part of Northwest Philadelphia. Edwin was a font of knowledge about the area, and he was beyond generous with his research and time, happy to help anyone with a question or a mystery about Germantown. Edwin had a column in the local paper that appeared for 40 weeks during the year 1903. It was charming, and it was pretty extensive, and it covered his minute and astute observations and thoughts on his two main passions, history and botany. Every entry concluded with a long list of all the plants that had been shared that week, including both the Latin and the common name. Often these lists included upwards of 30 to 40 different species. And recently, the Aubrey Arboretum republished Edwin's entries online in celebration of its centennial, which took place back in 2016. And here's what the chair of the Aubrey Arboretum Association, Mark Sellers, wrote about Edwin's final entry, which was published on December 4th, 1903. I think Mark perfectly captures Edwin's love for the area. He wrote, "To trace his path in this last article is to watch as a magician pulls one improbable thing after another from a hat that appears too small to hold them. Hemlock boughs bend under the weight of the ice and snow as Edwin stops to inspect a bird's nest that was occupied during his last visit, but now only contains snow. It's apparent that Edwin knew this was his last column. He reached as far into his memory and his understanding of what was beautiful around him. And while Edwin's observations have significant historical and botanical value to the student of horticulture in Philadelphia, what makes them interesting reading is his joy. Joy at seeing and knowing, joy from watching the seasons change and seeing the landscape and recognizing its significance." And here's a little excerpt from Edwin's last entry. "On rocks and on exposed banks, Speedwell, never in a hurry, waits, and in thickets, green, ropey runners of smilax, and the more refined bittersweet may be seen climbing over banks. On trunks of trees nearby are alabaster projecting seats, fit for elves or fairies, lichens, liverworts, and mosses, which escaped us earlier, become conspicuous, the greater volume of light admitted to the woods, exposing their hidden retreats. On hills and dry banks, club mosses prominently appear, and on damp rocks, where water trickles, marchantia, an exceedingly odd plant, will be found carpeting many an exposure, and like all hepatica, bearing unique flowers. So the never-ceasing procession continues, and forever when day departs or seasons die, galaxies of stars, constellations of indescribable beauty, and a moon whose splendor we can never fully know, course before us for observation and wonder." It was on this day in 1900 that an article ran in the Indianapolis News called "Science and Flowers. Study of the one does not destroy the love of the other." In retrospect, this is kind of a sweet little article, and I wanted to share this excerpt with you. Can people dip at all deeply into the real science of botany and yet enjoy flowers because of their beauty, because of the delight of finding them in lovely spots on lovely summer days, and because of their dear associations? Must the scientific sense blunt the aesthetic one? Often this will be the case. Pistils and stamens, nectaries and receptacles, these things will not always go well with artless talk about sweet blooms and bright berries, or even with the simple, very English names given by the unlearned to flowers. But on the other hand, there are many lovers of nature and field naturalists who will still care for the flower because of its beauty, and because it grows in the best places at the best time of year, because it vividly recalls to them the glad, sorrowful days of childhood or the tender passages of true love. Flowers, apart from the science of botany, are inextricably woven about human life. Let the botanist classify and name, but let him be careful not to do anything to bring into contempt the love of flowers, lest we rightly call him dry as dust and blind to beauty. Finally, let him help to keep up the old names as well as the new ones. We must always have our sweet William, King Cup, which is the marsh marigold, sweet Cicely, loosestrife, heartsease, which is the wild pansy, codlins and creams, which is the hairy willow herb, and feverfew. All these names have stories and meanings whose loss would be a loss to the language. Their very mention turns our thoughts to gardens in the pasture lands of summer, gone but coming again. And today is the birthday of the billionaire tobacco heiress and philanthropist Doris Duke, who was born on this day in 1912. When Duke was 46, she created an exotic public display garden called Duke Gardens to honor her father, James Buchanan Duke. Drawing on inspiration from DuPont's Longwood Gardens, the 11 interconnected gardens followed various themes, focusing on a particular country or period. Duke Gardens took visitors into an Italian courtyard, which featured a replica of Antonio Canova's sculpture, The Three Graces. Next came the colonial garden of the American South, featuring camellias, azaleas, magnolia, and crepe myrtle. Then came the ferns and orchids of the Edwardian garden, followed by the French and English gardens. There was an exceptional Elizabethan knot garden, an American desert, a Chinese garden, a Japanese garden, as well as an Indo-Persian garden, which featured a Persian rose garden. The final gardens were tropical and semi-tropical, featuring vines, papyrus, and bird of paradise. Clearly, Duke used what she had seen from her travels to design the elements in her displays. And Duke personally designed and installed the garden, sometimes working up to 16 hours a day. She donated the property to the Duke Foundation in 1960. In 2008, sentiments about the gardens changed as some folks felt that the gardens perpetuated the Duke family history of personal passions and conspicuous consumption. The gardens remained open until May 25th, and then they were dismantled. The Doris Duke Charitable Foundation said that the day of the display garden is past. The gardens consume an inordinate share of financial and staff resources. They would require a very expensive modernization, and they no longer reflect the vision of Duke Farm's future. A video record has been made for archival purposes. With the closure of Duke Gardens, another arm of the Duke family legacy, the Duke Farms Foundation, created a new indoor and outdoor display garden as part of Duke Farms, and it opened to the public on May 19th, 2012. And it was on this day in 1963 that Japan's Emperor Hirohito, an accomplished amateur botanist and zoologist, published his fourth book. The book was a 24-page supplement to The Plants of Nasu, a book he had published in the previous year. In unearthed words, today is the 200th birthday of the English Victorian author George Eliot, who was born on this day in 1819. George Eliot was the pen name for a woman named Mary Ann Evans, and her many works like Silas Marner and Middlemarch are filled with garden imagery. To Eliot, plants were the perfect representation of faith. Both required care and feeding in order to grow and flourish. On October 1st, 1841, Eliot wrote a letter to her old governess, Maria Lewis. She wrote, "Is this not a true autumn day? Just the still melancholy that I love. that makes life and nature harmonize. The birds are consulting about their migrations. The trees are putting on the hectic or the pallid hues of decay and begin to strew the ground that one's very footsteps may not disturb the repose of earth and air, while they give us a scent that is a perfect anodyne to the restless spirit. Delicious autumn. My very soul is wedded to it, and if I were a bird, I would fly about the earth, seeking the successive autumns. My favorite quotes from Eliot are about her love of roses. She wrote, "I think I am quite wicked with roses. I like to gather them and smell them till they have no scent left." And Eliot wrote this little poem about roses. You love the roses, so do I. I wish the sky would rain down roses as they rain down from off the shaken bush. Why will it not? Then all the valleys would be pink and white and soft to tread on. They would fall as light as feathers, smelling sweet. And it would be like sleeping and yet waking all at once. Over the sea, Queen, where we soon shall go, will it rain roses? This concept of raining roses was something Eliot wrote about a number of times, and this last quote about roses is one she's most famous for. It never rains roses. When we want more roses, we must plant more. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Herb Topiaries by Sally Gallo. This is such a cute, useful little book. It's old. It came out in 1992. Sally covers topiary basics before going into the plants that are perfect for topiaries: Victorian rosemary, lemon verbena, scented geraniums, and dwarf sage, just to name a few. And Sally reminds us that gardening in pots, working with topiaries, offers all the pleasures of gardening on a larger scale. Of course, the epitome of this pastime is training fragrant potted herbs into traditional topiary shapes. Sally walks us through it all, and her book is carefully illustrated, and she gives us the history, lore, and culture of a dozen favorite herbs, which is another thoughtful feature of this book. And you can get a used copy of Sally's book and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for about $3. Here's today's garden chore. Forage for a Yule log for your Thanksgiving table. I'm speaking about this little idea on an upcoming local TV segment for the American Heart Association. It's a great way to connect with nature and reduce stress, which can be a contributor to heart disease and stroke because it increases blood pressure. And at the same time, you can enjoy a tradition that is centuries old. In the early 1600s, the Yule log was a symbolic pillar meant to sweep away mischief and ensure a happy new year. People would go out and forage for a simple pine log, and often the log was selected up to 2 to 3 years before it was used, so that on the big day, the Yule log would undoubtedly burn long and brightly. And it was important to save a piece of the log to light the next year's Yule log. It was considered bad luck not to do so. During the Elizabethan times, people didn't have Christmas trees. Instead, they followed along with the Scandinavians and foraged for a Yule log. Robert Herrick wrote, "Kindle the Christmas brand, and then till sunset let it burn, which quenched, then lay it up again, till Christmas next return. Part must be kept wherewith to tend the Christmas log next year, and where 'tis safely kept, the fiend can do no mischief here. Once you start reading about it, you'll find there are so many charming traditions behind the Yule log. And after you find a specimen for yourself that fits your table, you can decorate it using the Yule log as a base for evergreens, florals, natural elements, dried fruits, spices, and fragrant oils. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. On this day in 1843, the New England farmer out of Boston shared a little update called Strawberries in November. It highlighted a little friendly competition between two strawberry gardeners, Mr. Brandigee of New London and Simeon Marble of Boston. Here's what it said. The New London Advocate noticed the fact that strawberries had been picked from the garden of Mr. Brandigee and asked, "Who can beat this?" But then Mr. Simeon Marble yesterday presented us with a bunch of ripe strawberries just plucked from the vines in his garden and in this city. They were of two varieties, red and white. And here's where they throw a little shade. The New London folks will please to consider themselves beaten. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these three words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up, and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you on Monday.